The moment HOA President Delilah Thornberry aimed that spray bottle at my PTSD service dog Ranger, she had no idea she'd just committed a federal crime punishable by up to a year in prison and a $75,000 fine. Picture this: a 58-year-old woman in tennis whites and a helmet of bleached hair standing over my golden retriever while industrial-strength herbicide mixed with ammonia dripped from his fur. The acrid chemical smell burned my nostrils as Ranger's panicked whimper echoed off those perfect suburban walls, and this psycho just stood there grinning like she'd won the lottery. But here's what she didn't know. I'm an Army veteran who spent 3 tours learning how to plan, execute, and win. And brother, she just declared war on the wrong family. What would you do if some entitled Karen poisoned your service dog with chemicals? Tell me in the comments and don't hold back. Where are you watching from? Because I guarantee your neighborhood has a Delilah too, and you're going to want to take notes on how to destroy them legally. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll know exactly how to turn the tables when petty tyrants think they run your life. My name is Marcus Kellerman, and 3 months ago, I thought I'd found paradise. After 3 tours in Afghanistan and more PTSD episodes than I care to count, my wife Elena and I scraped together enough money to move our 6-year-old daughter Sophia into Willowbrook Estates, 200 units of beige stucco uniformity that promised peaceful suburban living. The smell of fresh mulch and automatic sprinklers hit you the moment you drove through those pristine gates. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., the symphony of leaf blowers would announce another perfect day in HOA heaven. For $2,800 a month, we got a 3-bedroom townhouse, a designated pet area, and neighbors who actually waved when they saw you. But most importantly, we got a place where Ranger could do his job. Ranger is my 4-year-old golden retriever, specially trained to detect my anxiety attacks before they hit. When my heart rate spikes or my breathing changes, he'll nudge my hand or press against my leg. A living, breathing early warning system that's kept me functional for 2 years. In crowded spaces, he positions himself between me and other people. During thunderstorms or fireworks, he becomes a 75-pound weighted blanket. Day 3 after we moved in, I was in the designated pet area working on Ranger's crowd navigation training when she appeared. Delilah Thornberry looked like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog tennis skirt, visor, and a helmet of blonde hair that probably required industrial-strength hairspray to maintain. She had that fake sweet voice that immediately puts your teeth on edge. "Excuse me," she chirped, clipboard in hand. "Dogs that size need muzzles in common areas. It's clearly stated in Section 4.7 of our community guidelines." I kept my voice level. "Ma'am, this is Ranger. He's a registered service dog for my PTSD. Under federal law, service animals don't require muzzles unless they pose a direct threat." I showed her Ranger's official documentation, explained the Americans with Disabilities Act, even demonstrated one of his anxiety alerts. Ranger performed perfectly gentle, controlled, professional. Delilah's smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. "Well," she said, that sugary voice dropping about 10 degrees, "we'll just see about that." And that's when I knew I was in trouble. Week 1 brought daily, anonymous noise complaints about Ranger's training sessions, even though we were in the designated pet area during approved hours. Week 2, an official HOA notice about unapproved pet structures, referring to Ranger's outdoor kennel that was identical to 3 others in our building. Week 3, parking violations for my pickup truck being slightly oversized for standard spaces. By week 4, Elena was working double shifts to cover our legal fund, Sophia was asking why the mean lady always stared at our house, and my anxiety was spiking so badly that Ranger was working overtime. The woman was methodical, I'll give her that. Every harassment perfectly documented, every complaint technically within HOA guidelines, every interaction witnessed by her little army of pearl-clutching supporters. But she made one critical mistake. She went after my dog. That morning started like any other. I was walking Ranger to the mailbox part of our daily routine to keep his public access skills sharp when Delilah emerged from behind a landscaping truck like some suburban predator. "Your animal left deposits on my prize roses," she announced, brandishing a spray bottle like it was Excalibur. Before I could respond, before I could explain that Ranger hadn't been anywhere near her precious flowers, she squeezed that trigger and doused my service dog with whatever cocktail of chemicals she'd mixed up in her garage laboratory. Ranger immediately started pawing at his eyes, stumbling, whimpering in confusion. The acrid smell of herbicide mixed with ammonia filled the air. My PTSD kicked in, hard authority figure attacking my primary support system, and for a moment I was back in Afghanistan watching insurgents target our bomb-sniffing dogs. But this wasn't a war zone. This was suburban America. And what Delilah Thornberry had just done wasn't just cruel, it was federal. I scooped up Ranger and ran. The emergency vet was 12 minutes away, but it felt like 12 hours listening to his labored breathing in the carrier. That acrid chemical smell clung to my clothes like a toxic memory. Even now, 3 months later, the scent of cleaning supplies makes my stomach clench. "What did they spray him with?" Dr. Sarah Kim asked, immediately flushing Ranger's eyes with saline solution that turned an ugly brown color as it ran off his fur. "Some kind of herbicide mixed with ammonia. My neighbor, she claimed he damaged her roses." Her face went grim as she examined his eyes under a bright light. "Industrial strength. Whoever mixed this used 4 times the normal concentration. Another 10 minutes and we'd be looking at permanent corneal damage." The bill hit $1,247 for emergency treatment, eye irrigation, and respiratory care. But watching my rock-solid service dog reduced to a trembling, confused animal who flinched every time someone approached with a bottle, that damage couldn't be measured in dollars. That afternoon, I did what any smart soldier does after taking fire. I gathered intelligence. My laptop stayed hot for 3 hours straight as I dove into federal disability law. What I discovered made my pulse quicken with something that wasn't quite hope yet, but definitely wasn't despair anymore. Back during my discharge counseling, a VA lawyer had mentioned that attacking service dogs triggers automatic federal jurisdiction, something about how local prosecutors can't plea bargain away civil rights violations the way they do with simple assault cases. Turns out he was right. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, deliberately interfering with a service dog carries penalties up to $75,000 plus criminal charges. The federal government doesn't mess around when someone targets disabled veterans. I filed a police report with Officer Martinez, a decent guy who actually listened. But his response deflated my newfound optimism like a punctured tire. "The local DA won't prosecute without clear intent to cause harm," he explained, tapping his pen against the incident report. "She'll claim she was protecting community property from an aggressive animal." Protecting property? My dog was relieving himself in the designated pet area. Doesn't matter what actually happened. You need to prove a pattern of discrimination, not just one bad day. That's when the light bulb went off. This wasn't a simple assault case, this was warfare, and Delilah Thornberry had been planning this campaign long before my family moved to Willowbrook. Her counterattack came within 48 hours, swift and surgical like she'd been rehearsing it for months. An emergency HOA board meeting appeared on everyone's door. Dangerous animals in our community, immediate action required. The community center reeked of burnt coffee and nervous sweat when I arrived. Delilah had transformed herself into a suburban prosecutor, complete with poster boards displaying evidence of property damage. The photographs showed torn rose bushes, scattered mulch, and mysterious brown deposits that definitely didn't come from any golden retriever I'd ever seen. "We have families with small children," she announced, gesturing dramatically at her visual aids. "The liability exposure alone could bankrupt our entire association." The room fractured like glass hitting concrete. The Hendersons, an elderly couple who'd lived here since the development opened, stood up for us immediately. "That woman's gone completely insane," Mrs. Henderson whispered, loud enough for half the room to hear. "We've watched that dog for months. He's gentler than most children." But the Weatherbys, young professionals clutching their twin toddlers like shields, wouldn't even make eye contact. "We can't afford to get involved in HOA drama," Janet muttered when I tried to approach them during the break. "Property values, you know." 3 families actually stood up and announced they'd move out immediately if the dangerous dog situation wasn't resolved within 30 days. Then Delilah made her critical error. During public comments, probably high on the crowd's energy and her own perceived power, she decided to go for the throat. "Service dogs are just excuses people use to bring dangerous animals into civilized communities," she declared, that fake sweet voice finally dropping its mask to reveal pure venom underneath. "Real disabled people use wheelchairs and canes, not attack dogs that terrorize innocent neighbors." My phone was already recording. Every poisonous word crystal clear. Officer Martinez caught up with me in the parking lot afterward, his expression completely different from our earlier meeting. "She just handed you everything you need," he said quietly. "That statement proves intent to discriminate based on disability. Federal prosecutors love cases this clean-cut. The next morning, I started building my case the way the Army taught me, methodically, thoroughly, and with overwhelming force as the objective. Every photo got timestamps and GPS coordinates. Every recording got transcribed and backed up in triplicate. Every witness statement got notarized. Elena suggested we research HOA bylaws for counter violations. "Fight fire with fire," she said, spreading legal documents across our kitchen table like battle plans. But it was 6-year-old Sophia who asked the question that crystallized my entire strategy. "Daddy, why can't Ranger just bite the mean lady?" Looking down at my daughter's innocent face, then at Ranger lying by her feet with bandages over his eyes, I realized something important. Violence wasn't the answer here. Intelligence was. And I was about to get very, very intelligent about suburban warfare. The taste of impending victory, I discovered, is surprisingly sweet when you're serving it with federal civil rights violations as the main course. The HOA board meeting 2 weeks later looked like a town hall debate. Delilah had packed the community center with every pearl-clutching supporter she could muster, about 30 residents who nodded along to her every word like synchronized swimmers. She'd prepared for this moment like a general planning D-Day. Professional poster boards displayed a timeline of incidents, complete with dates, times, and grainy photos that somehow made Ranger look like a snarling beast instead of the gentle therapy dog who helped Sophia with her nightmares. "The Dangerous Animal Registry," she announced, unveiling her masterpiece with the flourish of a game show host, "will require monthly behavioral assessments for any animal over 50 pounds. Think of it as community insurance." The language was surgical in its precision breed neutral on paper, but designed to target service dogs like a heat-seeking missile. Monthly fees of $150 per assessment, conducted by certified behavioral specialists who happened to be Delilah's tennis partners from the country club. I brought Elena and Sophia for maximum emotional impact. My wife looked professional in her nursing scrubs, having come straight from a 12-hour shift. Sophia clutched a drawing she'd made of Ranger helping Daddy feel better stick figures, but the message was clear. When my turn came to speak, I kept my voice calm and factual. Federal law prohibits HOAs from requiring registration or fees for legitimate service animals, I explained, holding up printed copies of the relevant statutes. What Mrs. Thornberry is proposing violates the Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and opens this community to federal civil rights lawsuits. I'd learned that nugget during my late-night research sessions, cross-referencing disability law with HOA regulations until my eyes burned. The precedent cases were crystal clear. Communities that tried to regulate service animals got hammered by federal courts with judgments averaging $200,000 per violation. Then I called Ranger to the front of the room. "Ranger, anxiety alert." My golden retriever immediately moved to my left side, pressed against my leg, and placed his head on my thigh, the exact response trained to interrupt PTSD episodes before they spiral out of control. The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. "This is what a service dog looks like," I said quietly. "Not a pet, not a companion animal, but a medical device that happens to have 4 legs and a heartbeat." That's when Mrs. Elizabeth spoke up from the back row, an unexpected voice that changed everything. "I have something to say." The elderly treasurer stood slowly, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of community involvement. "My grandson has autism. His service dog helps him navigate social situations and prevents meltdowns. What Mrs. Thornberry is proposing would force us to choose between our child's medical needs and our home." After the meeting, Mrs. Elizabeth approached me privately, glancing around like she was sharing state secrets. "Delilah's been targeting families she considers different for years," she whispered. "The Johnsons' interracial couple got harassed until they moved out. The Garcias faced constant noise complaints about their children playing outside. Mr. Patterson with the oxygen tank, she tried to have his medical equipment banned as a fire hazard." The pattern was becoming clear. Delilah wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was a systematic discriminator who'd figured out how to weaponize HOA bylaws against anyone who didn't fit her suburban fantasy. Her escalation came the next morning like clockwork. 5 violation notices appeared on my door simultaneously. Unauthorized window treatments for standard blinds that came with the unit, landscape modifications for Elena's potted herbs on our patio, architectural violations for Sophia's chalk drawings on our driveway, parking infractions for Elena's car allegedly extending 2 inches past the designated space, and noise disturbance for Rangers training sessions during approved hours. Total threatened fines, $20,400, due immediately with daily penalties accumulating until paid. But while she was busy playing administrative games, I was conducting my own investigation. 3 hours of public records searches revealed something beautiful. Delilah Thornberry had been forced to resign from 3 previous HOA positions due to administrative irregularities. One settlement caught my attention: $45,000 paid to a disabled veteran whose guide dog had been accidentally poisoned during a community landscaping project. The case files were sealed, but the payment amount was public record. Same playbook, same target demographic, same vicious methods. That night, I spread everything across our dining room table like evidence from a crime scene. Elena brought coffee and her nursing school experience with pattern recognition. Mrs. Elizabeth provided copies of financial discrepancies she'd noticed in her role as treasurer. The Hendersons offered sworn statements about Delilah's previous harassment campaigns. She's not just targeting you, Elena realized, connecting dots across multiple families' experiences. She's running a systematic campaign to force out anyone who doesn't match her vision of the perfect community. The smell of Elena's stress baking filled the house chocolate chip cookies at 2 a.m., her way of processing anxiety, while we built a timeline spanning 4 years of documented discrimination. By dawn, we had something prosecutors dream about: a clear pattern of civil rights violations targeting protected classes backed by financial records, witness testimony, and Delilah's own recorded admissions. I looked at Ranger sleeping peacefully despite the medicated drops we still had to apply to his eyes twice daily. Then at Sophia's bedroom, where our daughter slept soundly because her daddy's service dog kept the nightmares away. Some battles choose you. This one had chosen us the moment a suburban dictator decided that disabled veterans didn't belong in her perfect community. The war was just getting started. Delilah's desperation move came disguised as a children's birthday party. Sophia's 7th birthday was supposed to be simple 12 kids, pizza, and cake in our backyard. But 20 minutes into Pin the Tail on the Donkey, a white county vehicle pulled into our driveway with official markings that made every parent freeze mid-conversation. Animal control officer Jennifer Walsh stepped out, clipboard in hand, apologizing before she'd even reached our patio. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we received multiple reports about a vicious dog at this address. State law requires immediate investigation of public safety complaints." The timing was surgical. 12 families watching as my service dog got inspected like a suspected criminal while 7-year-olds clutched juice boxes and stared. The humiliation was the point Delilah wanted witnesses to my public embarrassment. But I'd learned something during my research. Documentation beats emotion every time. My phone was recording before Officer Walsh finished her introduction. "Ma'am, could you tell me who filed these reports?" I asked, making sure my voice carried to the assembled parents. "I can't disclose that information, but—" She lowered her voice, glancing toward Delilah's townhouse where curtains twitched behind windows. "Someone's been calling our office daily for 2 weeks. Same voice, same complaints, always during business hours when most people are at work." Ranger submitted to the inspection with professional calm, demonstrating his training on command. Heel, sit, stay, anxiety alert, every response perfect despite the crowd of onlookers and the lingering effects of his chemical attack. "This is clearly a well-trained service animal," Officer Walsh announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Whoever's been filing these reports is either mistaken or deliberately wasting county resources." During my military service, I'd learned that false reporting to government agencies carries serious penalties. Turns out civilian law works the same way. Filing bogus animal control complaints constitutes filing false reports, a misdemeanor offense punishable by fines up to $2,000 and potential jail time. The party guests didn't leave immediately after the inspection ended. Instead, 3 families approached me privately with stories that made my blood pressure spike. "She did the same thing to us last year," whispered Dave Martinez, father of twin boys. "Called code enforcement about our excessive children's toys in the backyard. Claimed they were attracting rodents." Janet Patel's voice shook with remembered anger. "She reported our Diwali celebration as a fire hazard because we lit traditional lamps. Fire department showed up during our family dinner." The Hendersons shared the most disturbing revelation. She's been keeping files on residents, photos of when we leave, what cars we drive, who visits us. Mrs. Patterson caught her going through the mailboxes during lunch hour. By evening, we'd formed what Elena dubbed the Willowbrook Resistant Six families, sharing information about Delilah's systematic harassment campaigns. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Target, isolate, eliminate. But Delilah's next move crossed a line that even her supporters couldn't defend. Monday morning brought a bill charged directly to my HOA account, $3,200 in legal fees for frivolous complaints causing community disruption. According to the itemized invoice, every time I'd defended my rights or filed a complaint about harassment, I'd been generating unnecessary legal consultations that residents were required to fund. Her legal theory was brilliant in its audacity. Anyone causing community disruption through complaints would be responsible for the HOA's attorney fees, fight back against harassment, pay their lawyers, document discrimination, fund their defense. She was literally charging me for the privilege of defending my civil rights. That afternoon, Mrs. Elizabeth made a discovery that changed everything. "I've been reviewing HOA financial records for the quarterly report," she said, spreading bank statements across her dining room table. "Delilah's been paying herself $1,500 monthly for property management consulting services that aren't approved in any board resolution I can find." The math was devastating. $18,000 over 12 months paid from resident dues to Delilah's personal account for services that duplicated the actual property management company's contract. But the real bombshell came when Mrs. Elizabeth pulled up the community's insurance policy. HOA board members are covered for personal injury lawsuits up to $2 million, she explained. If someone successfully sues for discrimination, the insurance company pays not Delilah personally. Elena's nursing background kicked in like diagnostic training. She's been operating with a safety net this whole time. No personal financial risk, so she can harass residents without consequences. That evening, I reviewed everything we'd gathered: systematic discrimination, financial fraud, false reporting, and insurance fraud. Each violation carried different penalties, but together they painted a picture that federal prosecutors loved: organized civil rights violations with clear financial motives. Sophia appeared in the doorway holding her stuffed rabbit, hair still messy from her afternoon nap. "Daddy, why does the mean lady hate Ranger? He's the goodest boy," looking at my daughter's confused face, then at Ranger lying by her feet with those medicated eye drops still necessary weeks after his chemical attack. Something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about one family anymore. This was about every family Delilah had targeted, every disabled person she'd driven away, every child who'd learned that authority figures could be cruel without consequences. The war was about to go federal. And suburban dictators, I was learning, don't fare well against the United States Department of Justice. The smoking gun arrived buried on page 47 of Willowbrook's insurance policy documents. Mrs. Elizabeth had been digging through HOA financial records when she stumbled across something that made her call an emergency meeting at the Hendersons' house. We gathered around their kitchen table at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, surrounded by bankers' boxes full of contracts, bylaws, and legal documents that smelled like dust and bureaucratic secrets. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a clause highlighted in yellow. "Personal injury liability coverage includes board member actions performed within the scope of their duties. $2 million limit." Elena leaned forward, her nurse's analytical mind immediately grasping the implications. "So if someone successfully sues for discrimination, the insurance company pays, not Delilah personally," Mrs. Elizabeth finished. "She's been operating with a $2 million safety net this entire time." But that wasn't the worst part. 3 hours of cross-referencing bank statements with board meeting minutes revealed systematic financial fraud spanning 3 years. Delilah had been authorizing payments to herself for community management consulting at $1,500 per month, services that directly duplicated our actual property management company's contract. The unauthorized expenditures totaled $31,000. Landscaping invoices for work never performed, security consultations with companies that didn't exist, legal fees for attorneys who'd never been retained by the board. "She's been treating HOA funds like her personal checking account," Mrs. Elizabeth said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Every dollar came from our monthly dues while she harassed us for imaginary violations." Mr. Henderson pulled out a manila folder thick with photographs. "Gets worse. We've been documenting her surveillance activities. She's been photographing residents, recording license plate numbers, timing our daily schedules. Margaret, her sister, lives in Unit 47B and hasn't paid a single fine in 2 years despite multiple genuine violations. The scope of corruption was staggering. Family favoritism, financial fraud, systematic harassment, and insurance fraud all wrapped in a bow of civil rights violations. But the revelation that changed everything came from Elena's research into federal jurisdiction requirements. "Marcus, your veteran status qualifies this case for federal disability court," she explained, scrolling through Department of Justice guidelines on her laptop. "Service dog attacks fall under federal hate crime statutes when they target disabled veterans. The FBI has a dedicated unit for systematic ADA violations." My pulse quickened as I read over her shoulder. Federal agencies moved slower than local prosecutors, but they carried consequences that could end careers and change lives permanently. Prison time instead of plea bargains. Permanent federal records instead of sealed settlements. Mrs. Elizabeth's accounting background had uncovered the financial crimes, but Elena's discovery opened the door to federal civil rights prosecution. Together, they represented something Delilah had never faced: organized, documented, systematic accountability. She's not just targeting us, I realized, connecting patterns across multiple families' experiences. She's been running a criminal enterprise disguised as community management, embezzlement, fraud, systematic discrimination, all protected by insurance money and sealed settlement agreements. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For 8 months, Delilah had controlled every interaction through HOA bylaws and community pressure. But federal civil rights law doesn't care about suburban politics or homeowner agreements. The United States Constitution trumps community guidelines every time. Elena spread our evidence across the table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Financial records showing systematic fraud, photographs documenting surveillance and harassment, audio recordings proving discriminatory intent, medical records from Ranger's chemical attack, and witness statements from multiple families spanning 3 years. "We're not fighting a neighborhood bully anymore," she said quietly. "We're building a federal case against organized civil rights violations." The insurance leverage was beautiful in its simplicity. Delilah's safety net could become her greatest liability. Insurance companies hate federal civil rights cases because they can't control the outcome through settlement negotiations. Federal prosecutors don't accept payouts to make discrimination disappear. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope backed by overwhelming force. The suburban dictator was about to meet the United States federal justice system, and that meeting, I suspected, wouldn't go well for her. Elena found our secret weapon through the Veterans Organization newsletter, a small ad buried between PTSD support groups and job placement services. Disability rights attorneys specializing in ADA violations, pro bono representation for veterans with service animals, 89% success rate. Sarah Martinez looked exactly like someone you'd want fighting your battles. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a handshake that said she'd crushed better opponents than Delilah Thornberry before lunch. Her downtown office walls displayed framed court victories like trophies, discrimination cases won, civil rights restored, and bullies held accountable. "Federal prosecutors love cases this clean," she said after reviewing our evidence for 2 hours. "Systematic pattern, clear financial motive, disabled veteran targeted specifically because of his service dog. This isn't harassment anymore, it's organized civil rights violations." While Sarah handled federal complaint preparation, I organized our evidence like planning a military operation. 47 violation notices arranged chronologically, audio recordings transcribed and time-stamped, witness statements notarized and cross-referenced, every photo tagged with GPS coordinates and metadata. The dining room table disappeared under color-coded binders, red for financial crimes, blue for discrimination evidence, yellow for witness testimony, green for federal law precedents. Elena joked it looked like a war room, but that's exactly what it was. Mrs. Elizabeth's forensic accounting skills revealed the full scope of Delilah's embezzlement operation. Bank records obtained through legal discovery showed 3 years of systematic theft disguised as legitimate HOA expenses. Payments to her personal account totaled $47,000, not the $31,000 we'd originally calculated. "Look at this pattern," Mrs. Elizabeth explained, spreading bank statements across her kitchen counter. Every time someone filed a complaint against her harassment, she authorized a new consulting fee payment to herself. She was literally profiting from our suffering. The community mobilization happened faster than I'd expected. Word spread through text messages and whispered conversations by mailboxes. 22 families eventually joined our accountability coalition, sharing horror stories that painted a picture of systematic abuse spanning 4 years. Secret Tuesday meetings in the Hendersons' garage became our command center. Elena brought legal pads and took notes like a court reporter. Mrs. Elizabeth provided financial analysis. The Hendersons coordinated witness statements. I maintained the evidence timeline and strategic planning. The petition for board recall required signatures from 51% of homeowners, a detail that most residents didn't understand. You didn't need to be physically present to sign, and rental properties counted if the actual owner signed. This was crucial intelligence that we kept to ourselves while Delilah focused on intimidating current residents. Sarah Martinez coordinated media contact through her network of civil rights attorneys. Channel 7's investigative team had been looking for an HOA abuse story since their producer received complaints from 3 different communities about similar harassment patterns. Technical preparation required military precision. Security cameras installed around our property captured common area activities, completely legal, since HOA bylaws required 24-hour surveillance for resident safety. Digital forensics recovered deleted emails from the HOA server using legal discovery procedures that Delilah couldn't block. The federal complaint preparation revealed something beautiful about American justice. When you target disabled veterans, you don't just face local prosecutors who might accept plea bargains. You face the FBI Civil Rights Division, federal prosecutors with unlimited resources, and judges who take constitutional violations personally. Elena's medical background proved invaluable for documenting PTSD impact. VA counselors provided assessments showing how systematic harassment had increased my anxiety episodes by 300%. Ranger required additional training sessions to rebuild confidence shattered by his chemical attack. Our strategic timing was surgical. All legal actions would launch simultaneously for maximum impact. Federal complaint, state embezzlement charges, and community recall petition filed the same day. Media coverage scheduled during the monthly HOA meeting when maximum residents would witness Delilah's public accountability moment. The knowledge we'd gathered could help other families facing similar situations. HOA board recall requires only 51% of homeowner signatures, not residents, meaning renters can't vote, but property owners living elsewhere can. Federal ADA complaints bypass local arbitration requirements that HOAs often use to suppress discrimination cases. Insurance companies must provide legal defense for board members, creating an inherent conflict of interest when those same members commit insurable civil rights violations. Sarah explained the financial mathematics that made our case irresistible to prosecutors. HOA embezzlement claims allow recovery of triple damages plus attorney fees. Your chemical attack on Ranger qualifies for punitive damages under federal hate crime statutes. We're looking at potential recovery exceeding $200,000, plus criminal penalties that could include federal prison time. 3 contingency plans covered every possible response. If Delilah resigned before formal charges, we'd pursue individual criminal prosecution. If she attempted retaliation, additional federal complaints were prepared and ready to file. If the community tried to ostracize us through social pressure, media attention would expose their complicity in systematic discrimination. By Thursday evening, our war room looked like a federal prosecutor's dream case. Organized evidence, coordinated legal strategy, community support, media attention, and clear financial damages that insurance companies couldn't negotiate away through quiet settlements. Sophia wandered into the dining room after dinner, surveying our organized chaos of legal documents and evidence binders. "Daddy, are you going to arrest the mean lady?" "No, sweetheart," I said, scratching Ranger behind his ears while he performed a perfect anxiety alert. "But some very important people are going to make sure she can't be mean to other families anymore." The suburban dictator's reign of terror was about to end. And this time, there wouldn't be any sealed settlements or quiet resignations. Federal prosecutors don't accept hush money. Justice was coming to Willowbrook Estates. Delilah's panic response came disguised as community outreach. Thursday morning brought an unexpected knock on Mrs. Elizabeth's door. Delilah stood there with a bouquet of grocery store flowers and her sweetest fake smile, offering what sounded like genuine friendship but felt like desperation wrapped in designer tennis wear. "I've been thinking we got off on the wrong foot," she chirped, inviting herself into Mrs. Elizabeth's living room. "The board could really use your financial expertise. How would you feel about a consulting position, say $5,000 to help reorganize our record-keeping system?" Mrs. Elizabeth's accounting instincts immediately recognized a bribery attempt. She kept her voice neutral, while her phone recorded every word from her pocket. What kind of reorganization? Oh, you know. Oh, you. Sometimes old financial records create confusion. It might be better to start fresh, clean slate for everyone. Delilah's eyes never stopped moving, scanning Mrs. Elizabeth's coffee table where HOA bank statements lay partially visible. The offer was crystal clear, $5,000 to destroy evidence of 3 years' worth of embezzlement. What Delilah didn't know was that Mrs. Elizabeth had already copied everything and stored backup files with 3 different attorneys. "I'll need to think about it," Mrs. Elizabeth replied carefully. Delilah's mask slipped just enough to reveal the desperation underneath. "Time is important here. The insurance company has been asking questions about board procedures. It would be unfortunate if any misunderstandings cause problems for the whole community." That night, Mrs. Elizabeth played the recording for our emergency coalition meeting. The smell of Henderson's garage motor oil and old newspapers couldn't mask the tension as we listened to Delilah's voice offering cash for evidence destruction. But bribery was just the beginning of her scorched earth campaign. Over the next week, the harassment escalated beyond anything we'd experienced. My mailbox disappeared completely, not damaged, but surgically removed from its concrete foundation with professional tools. Elena found antifreeze in Ranger's outdoor water bowl, caught only because our security cameras captured a figure in dark clothing approaching our patio at 3 a.m. The antifreeze discovery sent ice through my veins. That chemical kills dogs slowly and painfully, causing kidney failure that looks like natural illness unless you specifically test for poisoning. If Ranger had drunk even a small amount. But Delilah's most vicious attack targeted Elena at work. Anonymous calls to University Hospital's Human Resources Department claimed she was abusing prescription drugs and creating unsafe patient conditions due to domestic instability. 3 separate complaints, all using medical terminology that suggested inside knowledge of hospital procedures. Elena's supervisor called her into a closed-door meeting that lasted 2 hours. "We know these complaints are bogus," Dr. Patricia Williams assured her. "But hospital policy requires investigation of any allegations involving patient safety. You'll need to submit to random drug testing for the next 6 months." The humiliation was calculated and surgical. Elena had worked at that hospital for 8 years, building a reputation as one of their most reliable charge nurses. Now colleagues whispered in hallways and questioned her professional competence because some suburban psychopath wanted to destroy our family. Sophia became a target too. A woman matching Delilah's description was seen following our daughter home from school, staying exactly 50 feet behind close enough to intimidate, far enough to claim innocence if confronted. The crossing guard, Mrs. Rodriguez, confirmed the same car had circled the school parking lot during dismissal for 3 consecutive days. Elena started taking time off work to pick up Sophia personally, costing us wages we couldn't afford while legal fees mounted despite pro bono representation. My counter-response used every intelligence technique the Army had taught me. Additional security cameras revealed Delilah's nighttime prowling patterns. She conducted surveillance between 2 and 4 a.m. when most residents slept. License plate readers installed at community entry points documented her sister Margaret's vehicle making unexplained trips during late hours. Sarah Martinez recommended a professional private investigator through her network of civil rights attorneys. Jake Morrison, former FBI, specialized in building criminal cases against organized harassment campaigns. His fee came from the Veterans Legal Defense Fund that had grown to $8,000 through donations from military families who'd heard our story. The social media campaign Elena launched gained traction faster than we'd anticipated. #Willowbrook Truth started trending in local community groups as other families shared similar harassment experiences. Channel 7's investigative producer contacted us about expanding their story after receiving dozens of tips about HOA abuse across 3 counties. But Delilah's most desperate move revealed how completely she'd lost control. Friday evening brought an emergency HOA meeting notice posted on every door. Special assessment required to cover legal defense costs from frivolous lawsuits threatening community financial stability. Amount $1,200 per household, due within 30 days. She was attempting to charge every resident for defending against our discrimination lawsuit, essentially forcing the community to fund their own oppression while she escaped personal financial consequences through insurance coverage. The legal implications were staggering. Using HOA funds to defend personal criminal behavior violated fiduciary duty laws in multiple ways. Sarah Martinez called it the dumbest move I've seen in 15 years of civil rights law. That weekend, Jake Morrison's surveillance uncovered the final piece of evidence we needed. Delilah and Margaret met at a Starbucks 15 minutes outside our community, thinking they were safe from neighborhood witnesses. Jake's telephoto lens captured clear photographs of them reviewing documents that appeared to be financial records and legal strategies. But more importantly, his directional microphone recorded their conversation planning to eliminate the military problem permanently through coordinated harassment targeting Elena's hospital job and Sophia's school enrollment. Conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of authority. Federal hate crime enhancement for targeting disabled veterans. Organized criminal enterprise spanning multiple jurisdictions. The FBI Civil Rights Division was about to become very interested in two sisters from suburban HOA board positions who thought they could destroy disabled veterans without consequences. Monday morning, I looked at Ranger during our daily training session. His eyes still required medicated drops twice daily, but his confidence had returned completely. He performed anxiety alerts with military precision, pressed against my leg during crowd navigation exercises, and maintained perfect focus despite everything he'd endured. "Good boy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Just a few more days, buddy. Then this nightmare ends for everyone." The federal justice system moves slowly but inevitably. And suburban dictators, I was learning, make very poor defendants when faced with unlimited prosecutorial resources. Delilah's nuclear option arrived via certified mail on a Tuesday morning that started with thunderstorms and got worse from there. The lawsuit documents were thick enough to stop Bullett's 47 pages of legal accusations, claiming I had threatened her with military violence and created a climate of fear throughout the community. Her attorney, some downtown firm that specialized in personal injury cases, was demanding $100,000 in damages for severe emotional distress, defamation, and intentional infliction of mental anguish. The fabricated evidence was professionally crafted. Audio recordings of our conversations had been edited so skillfully that my calm responses to her harassment sounded like veiled threats. "I know how to handle problems" became, "I know how to handle people like you." Context stripped away until reasonable self-defense sounded like intimidation. But the most vicious part was her psychological warfare strategy, painting a disabled veteran with PTSD as inherently dangerous to suburban families. Marcus Kellerman's military background and documented mental health issues make him unsuitable for residential community living, the complaint stated in cold legal language. His possession of an unregistered large breed dog, combined with his admitted history of combat trauma, creates an ongoing threat to neighborhood safety and property values. The character assassination campaign went public within hours. Anonymous flyers appeared on every doorstep. "Dangerous veteran alert, protect your families." Social media attacks from newly created fake accounts spread rumors about my military service, claiming I'd been dishonorably discharged for violence against civilians. Elena's nursing career became collateral damage. Someone called the state nursing board claiming she was providing inadequate patient care due to domestic violence in her home environment. The investigation would take months to resolve, and hospital administration was already questioning her stability under stress. But the cruelest attack targeted Sophia directly. Anonymous reports to Child Protective Services alleged that our home environment was unsafe for minor children due to parental PTSD episodes and presence of aggressive animal. CPS was required by law to investigate, meaning social workers would interview our 7-year-old daughter about whether Daddy ever scared her or if Ranger had ever been mean. That night, sitting in our living room while Sophia slept peacefully upstairs, I hit my lowest point since Afghanistan. The walls felt like they were closing in. My chest tightened with familiar anxiety, and Ranger immediately moved to my side for an alert sequence that had become disturbingly frequent. "Maybe we should just move," I whispered to Elena. "Find another place. Start over. This is destroying our family." Elena's response surprised me with its fierce intensity. "Absolutely not. We're not running from this psychopath. How many other families has she driven away? How many disabled people have given up because fighting seemed too hard?" Her words hit like cold water against panic. This wasn't about our family anymore. This was about every family Delilah would target next. Every disabled veteran who'd faced similar discrimination, every child who'd learned that bullies win when good people surrender. The support network rally came from unexpected directions. The Veterans Organization provided security escorts for Sophia's school transportation after learning about CPS involvement. Mrs. Elizabeth organized a neighborhood watch specifically to document Delilah's surveillance activities. Henderson's grandson, a military lawyer stationed at Fort Bragg, offered additional legal consultation via video calls. But the most powerful support came from our VA counselor, Dr. James Patterson, who'd been treating my PTSD since discharge. His professional assessment dismantled Delilah's psychological warfare strategy with clinical precision. Mr. Kellerman represents successful PTSD management through service animal therapy, his report stated. His anxiety responses are well controlled, his family relationships are stable, and his community integration demonstrates textbook recovery patterns. Any deterioration in symptoms directly correlates with systematic harassment campaigns that would affect any individual, regardless of mental health history. Channel 7's investigative team uncovered the story behind Delilah's harassment expertise. Their research revealed 4 different communities where she'd held HOA positions, and a pattern of systematic abuse that spanned 8 years. Previous settlements totaled $180,000 paid by various insurance companies to make discrimination cases disappear quietly. She's been running the same playbook for nearly a decade, reporter Jennifer Walsh explained during our recorded interview. Target protected classes use HOA authority to harass them into leaving, then negotiate sealed settlements that prevent public exposure of her methods. The FBI investigation expanded beyond our case after federal agents interviewed previous victims from multiple jurisdictions. 7 families across 3 counties agreed to provide testimony despite non-disclosure agreements that had kept them silent for years. Agent Rodriguez's update was music to my ears. Pattern of systematic civil rights violations under color of authority, organized conspiracy spanning multiple jurisdictions, financial crimes involving interstate commerce. This isn't a neighborhood dispute anymore, it's a RICO investigation. Sarah Martinez's legal strategy crystallized around a beautiful piece of federal law. When discrimination targets disabled veterans, federal prosecutors can pursue hate crime enhancements that carry mandatory minimum sentences without possibility of parole reduction. She picked the wrong target, Sarah explained during our strategy meeting. Veterans with service dogs represent the most protected class under federal civil rights law. Every harassment incident becomes a federal crime with enhanced penalties. The evidence avalanche was now overwhelming. Security footage documented 23 separate incidents of stalking, property destruction, and chemical attacks. Financial forensics revealed $73,000 in embezzled HOA funds over 4 years. Medical documentation proved Ranger's poisoning caused permanent eye sensitivity requiring daily medication. Jake Morrison's private investigation uncovered Delilah's personal journals, handwritten documentation of her harassment strategies that read like a serial predator's playbook. Military people bring violence and instability to quality neighborhoods, she'd written. Service dogs are just excuses for dangerous animals that threaten property values and family safety. The smoking gun was her 3-week planning timeline for Ranger's chemical attack, complete with research into industrial herbicide concentrations and anticipated veterinary treatment costs. But the psychological turning point came from an unexpected source, Sophia herself. Friday evening, after another day of CPS interviews and media attention, our daughter wandered into the dining room where Elena and I were reviewing legal documents for the 100th time. "Daddy," she said, climbing into my lap, while Ranger settled at our feet. "Why doesn't the mean lady just say she's sorry and try to be nice to people?" Looking into her innocent 7-year-old eyes, I realized something profound. This fight had never been about revenge or winning. It was about teaching our daughter that good people don't surrender to bullies, that justice sometimes requires standing up even when it's hard, and that communities become stronger when they protect their most vulnerable members. "Because some people never learned how to be kind, sweetheart," I explained, holding her close while Ranger's warm presence anchored us both. "But that's why good people have to stick together and make sure everyone gets treated fairly." Elena smiled through tears she'd been holding back for weeks. "We're not fighting for us anymore," she whispered. "We're fighting for everyone she's hurt and everyone she might hurt next." The suburban dictator's reign of terror was about to face something she'd never encountered, the full weight of federal civil rights enforcement backed by a community that refused to be intimidated. Monday morning would bring justice to Willowbrook Estates. And this time, there would be no sealed settlements or quiet resignations. Federal prosecutors don't accept hush money. They deliver consequences. The monthly HOA board meeting on November 15th drew the largest crowd in Willowbrook Estates' History 89 residents packed into a community center that normally held 30. The air crackled with tension you could taste, thick as the smell of stale coffee and nervous perspiration. Folding chairs scraped against concrete as neighbors who'd avoided each other for months now sat in clearly defined factions. The sound of whispered conversations created a low buzz that reminded me of pre-mission briefings in Afghanistan, that electric anticipation before everything changes forever. Delilah sat at the head table looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. Her normally perfect blonde helmet showed gray roots. Her tennis whites looked wrinkled, and her hands shook just enough to rattle the papers she couldn't seem to organize properly. But the real power in the room sat quietly in the back corner. FBI agent Rodriguez wore a simple dark suit that screamed federal authority to anyone who knew what to look for. Next to him, Channel 7's camera crew set up equipment despite Delilah's increasingly frantic objections. "This is a private meeting," she announced, her voice pitched higher than usual. "Unauthorized media presence violates Community Bylaws, Section 12.4. Mrs. Elizabeth's response came smooth as silk from her treasurer's seat. "Actually, Section 3.2 of the Open Meeting Act requires HOA meetings to remain accessible to public observation unless executive session is properly called. Would you like me to read the specific statute?" It was beautiful watching Delilah's first line of defense crumble in real time. Her procedural knowledge, the weapon she'd used to terrorize residents for years, had just been turned against her by someone who actually understood the law. I stood and walked to the microphone with Ranger at my side, both of us moving with the calm precision of 2 soldiers who'd prepared for this moment through months of careful planning. "Good evening, neighbors. 8 months ago, this woman poisoned my service dog with industrial chemicals." The large screen behind me flickered to life, displaying security footage of Delilah's chemical attack in high definition. You could see everything. Her deliberate approach, the spray bottle raised like a weapon, Ranger's immediate distress, and my frantic rush to get him medical attention. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd as they witnessed clear assault playing out in their community center. Several people pulled out phones to record the footage, while others simply stared in horror at behavior they'd heard about but never actually seen. "What you just watched is a federal hate crime," I continued, my voice carrying the controlled authority of someone who'd briefed generals and testified before Congress. "Deliberately attacking a service dog constitutes interference with medical equipment under the Americans with Disabilities Act." That's when Agent Rodriguez stood up, his FBI credentials visible to everyone in the room as he introduced himself with the kind of calm professionalism that makes career criminals nervous. "Mrs. Thornberry, you are currently under federal investigation for systematic civil rights violations, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit hate crimes against disabled veterans." His voice carried absolute authority. "This is not a neighborhood dispute. This is a federal criminal matter." The silence was so complete you could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. But I wasn't finished. Mrs. Elizabeth activated the projection system we'd set up earlier, displaying 3 years of financial evidence in charts and graphs that even HOA supporters couldn't deny. $73,000, I announced. "That's how much Delilah Thornberry stole from your monthly dues while she harassed your neighbors for imaginary violations." The screen showed bank transfers, forged invoices, and payments to personal accounts disguised as community expenses. Every transaction was documented with dates, amounts, and purposes that revealed systematic embezzlement spanning multiple years. Personal car payments funded by HOA dues, family vacation expenses charged as community consultation fees, legal defense for her harassment campaigns paid with your money while she attacked disabled veterans and their families. Delilah's denial came in a voice cracking with desperation. "This is a conspiracy orchestrated by military extremists who threaten community safety. His PTSD makes him dangerous to families with children." Fatal mistake. She'd just repeated discriminatory language in front of federal agents, television cameras, and 89 witnesses. Mrs. Elizabeth calmly activated the audio system. Delilah's own voice filled the community center through speakers that carried every poisonous word to the back row. "Service dogs are just excuses people use to bring dangerous animals into civilized communities. Real disabled people use wheelchairs, not attack dogs that terrorize innocent neighbors. The community uprising was spontaneous and beautiful. Mr. Henderson stood first, his 80-year-old voice shaking with righteous anger. "Enough of your hate, Delilah. This man served our country in combat while you've been stealing from the neighbors who trusted you." One by one, residents began standing. The Martinez family shared how she'd reported their children's birthday party as a noise violation. The Patels described harassment during their religious celebrations. Mrs. Washington revealed how Delilah had tried to ban her grandson's autism service dog using the same tactics she'd used against Ranger. The pattern was undeniable: systematic targeting of anyone who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. Then came the moment that broke her completely. Margaret Thornberry entered the room unexpectedly, walking straight to the microphone with the determined stride of someone who'd finally found her conscience. "I can't keep lying for my sister anymore," she announced to stunned silence. The chemical attack on that service dog wasn't spontaneous anger, it was planned for 3 weeks. I have her journals. I have the receipts for the industrial herbicide. I have recordings of her practicing what she'd say to police afterward. Agent Rodriguez approached the head table with handcuffs that gleamed under the community center's fluorescent lights. "Delilah Thornberry, you are under arrest for federal hate crimes, embezzlement, mail fraud, and conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of authority." The Miranda rights echoed through absolute silence as 89 witnesses watched suburban tyranny finally meet federal justice. Camera flashes captured every moment as handcuffs clicked closed on wrists that had signed fraudulent checks and harassment complaints for too many years. My final statement carried the weight of 8 months' worth of systematic abuse. This was never about revenge. This was about justice for every family she's terrorized, every disabled person she's driven away, and every child who learned that bullies win when good people stay silent. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up for months suddenly found their voices, sharing stories of harassment and expressing gratitude that someone had finally stood up to the community dictator. Channel 7's reporter delivered her live conclusion with Delilah's empty chair prominently displayed behind her. Federal agents say this represents the largest HOA discrimination prosecution in state history, with potential prison sentences exceeding 5 years. As Delilah's perp walk played on local television and #Willowbrook Justice trended across social media, I looked down at Ranger, who had maintained perfect composure throughout the chaos. His tail wagged once professional acknowledgement that the mission was complete. The suburban dictator's reign of terror was officially over. Justice had come to Willowbrook Estates, and it was wearing FBI credentials. 3 months later, justice arrived with the satisfying crack of a federal judge's gavel echoing through a packed courtroom. Delilah Thornberry pled guilty to federal hate crime charges and received 18 months in federal prison, no early parole, no house arrest, no community service substitution. The orange jumpsuit was a far cry from her designer tennis whites. Sister Margaret got 2 years probation and paid full restitution of $73,000, plus $45,000 in harassment damages that funded Sophia's college savings account. But watching Delilah's perp walk on 3 different news channels? Priceless. The community transformation happened faster than anyone expected. Mrs. Elizabeth won the HOA presidency with 87% voter participation, becoming our first Asian American leader. Mr. Henderson took the treasurer position, promising honest accounting and zero tolerance for suburban dictators. New bylaws explicitly protected service animals and prohibited discrimination with enforcement penalties that would make future Delilahs think twice before targeting disabled veterans. The insurance settlement created something beautiful: Ranger's Run, a $150,000 fully accessible playground where children with disabilities could experience pure joy on equipment designed specifically for their needs. The grand opening drew 200 people, including the governor's representative and news crews documenting our community's transformation from discrimination to inclusion. Standing at that podium with Ranger by my side, looking out at faces that once showed fear now beaming with pride, I realized we'd accomplished something bigger than personal justice. Sometimes true service isn't just helping yourself, I said. It's helping others find the courage to stand up for what's right. Elena's career soared after hospital administration recognized how her advocacy skills had revolutionized patient care protocols. Sophia's new friends specifically sought out the family with the hero dog, and play dates now happened at our house where kids learned the difference between pets and life-saving medical equipment. Ranger's health recovered completely, though he still needs those daily eye drops battle scars from chemical warfare waged by suburban terrorists. His confidence returned stronger than ever, and he's helped train service dogs for 3 other veterans who heard our story and refused to accept discrimination as inevitable. The ripple effects exceeded our wildest expectations. Federal precedent from our case triggered HOA discrimination prosecutions in 12 states. Ranger's Law passed with bipartisan support, protecting service animals nationwide. Documentary producers offered film rights, but we chose to work with the VA, creating educational materials that have helped 500-plus veteran families fight housing discrimination. Property values jumped 12% as national media coverage attracted buyers who wanted to raise children somewhere that stood up to bullies instead of enabling them. 3 veteran families moved in, bringing service dogs who participate in monthly training sessions that have become neighborhood social events. Our first annual Willowbrook Family Festival last weekend showed how far we'd come. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with children's laughter as Sophia organized games for special needs kids. Elena coordinated activities that brought together families once too afraid to speak. I flipped burgers while neighbors shared stories of standing up to their own local tyrants. Ranger moved through the crowd like the celebrity he'd become, tail wagging as kids lined up to meet the dog whose courage had transformed their entire world. His service vest bore a new patch, Federal Civil Rights Hero. But Tuesday's letter reminded us the work continues. A veteran in Colorado faces identical harassment chemical attacks on his service dog, fraudulent violations, systematic discrimination. Elena immediately suggested expanding our nonprofit to help families nationwide. We've learned a few things about destroying suburban dictators, I agreed, watching Ranger perform perfect anxiety alerts during our morning training session. The knowledge we've shared has practical power. ADA.gov provides free service animal guidance. State Attorney General websites publish HOA law summaries. VA regional offices connect veterans with civil rights advocates. Most importantly, document everything, because federal prosecutors build cases on evidence, not emotions. Looking back at our dining room table covered with legal documents, timeline charts, and evidence binders, I'm amazed how far we've come. That war room became the command center for a federal civil rights victory that's protected thousands of families nationwide. Sometimes justice isn't about winning, it's about ensuring the next family doesn't face the same battle alone. Ranger may be my service dog, but our community learned what true service looks like when good people refuse to surrender to evil. The sound of children playing on accessible equipment, the sight of service dogs training without harassment, the taste of barbecue shared among neighbors who once lived in fear. These are the real victories that matter long after courtroom drama fades. Your battle cry moment. What's your HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments and don't hold back. I want to hear how you fought back or wish you had. Tag someone who needs to see this story. Ready for more justice? Hit that subscribe button for Karen's stories and ring the notification bell. Next week, Karen's school principal banned my kid's service dog until parents discovered her $50K embezzlement scheme and FBI got involved. Because bullies are everywhere, but so are federal prosecutors when you know how to call them. Final score, $118,000 legal costs recovered, 47 families empowered. 12 states using our precedent, 200-plus children served by accessible playground. Most important number, 0 harassment complaints since Delilah's federal conviction. Dedicated to Ranger and every service dog whose courage changes the world, one suburban dictator at a time.